Gracie Jiu-Jitsu rocks. Welcome to the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks podcast, a podcast dedicated to Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and all things Gracie, including self-defense, competition, anti-bullying, women's self-defense and empowerment, nutrition, and most especially, the people involved in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. This podcast is for the average Joe. It's for anyone who practices, trains, teaches, or just loves to talk about or hear about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. We'll explore the lives of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu practitioners, how they got involved in the art, and what effect it's had on their lives. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to episode 6 of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks podcast. I'm your host, Marty Josie, and welcome to the show. Today we'll be speaking with Jeff Howard. Jeff is a longtime close friend and training partner of mine for the past 6 years, and he's also a practicing attorney in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Jeff will be speaking to us about some of the legal aspects of martial arts and self-defense, and give us some tips on how to stay safe and protected as martial artists. Today's episode is longer than the previous episodes, so I just wanted to give you a fair warning up front. So let's get started. Today's quote is, "Jiu-Jitsu represents the triumph of human intelligence over brute strength." And that quote is from Grandmaster Elio Gracie. So as always, want to hear your thoughts, your opinions. Please go to the website at Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks and post a comment or call 919-251-5053. Again, 919-251-5053, and leave a voice message with your thoughts, comments, and how this quote applies or affects you as a martial artist and a person. Remember that voice messages as well as written comments or posts are subject to being played on the air or read on the air, and just part of the continued conversation and discussion that we're having. Okay, without further ado, let's meet Jeff now. Okay, my guest today is Jeff Howard of Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And Jeff's not only been one of my best friends for the last 6 years, but also my steady training partner. So I'm excited to have him on the show today. My goal is to not only introduce him to the rest of the Gracie community, but have him guest host on some future episodes and certainly co-host as well. So he's also the owner of Jeffrey Howard Law at jeffreyhowardlaw.com. And he's going to share some legal advice with us, or some legal information about martial arts and self-defense today as well. So welcome, Jeff, and thanks for being here.
God, thanks for having me, Marty. This is going to be tons of fun. I hope I am compelling listening.
All right, so why don't we just start by having you share your background, your martial arts journey, how it started and how it developed and how it led you where you are today.
God, I don't know if we have enough time. My martial arts journey is kind of like The Hobbit. There's lots of twists and turns and dead ends and some trolls and whatnot. But yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. I grew up in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and I don't know, depending on who's listening to this, you may or may not know a lot about Fayetteville, but it's a strange place. It's a military town is really all you need to know about it. So, it's a little wacky. And so I had a lot of exposure to martial arts, combat, and whatnot. Not like I was, in the hood or anything, but, a few tussles here and there. And growing up, I always really wanted to learn how to fight. And, of course, I was also influenced by watching kung fu movies. There was kung fu theater on Saturdays. And,
Absolutely.
Like many martial artists today, we were influenced a great deal by watching those movies.
We all wanted to be Bruce Lee, right?
Right. Or, learn the flying guillotine technique or whatever it was. So, for whatever reason, I didn't find martial arts as a child. Just, didn't happen for me then. But when I got to college in Chapel Hill, I was able to sort of find something and pick something. And at that point, Steven Seagal was kind of cool.
Oh, yes.
It was early 90s. And so, of course, I wanted to do Aikido because that was the cool art back then, right? So I got into Aikido, and I did it for about a year. And whenever I was doing it, we would, just do techniques. And, here's some wrist locks. Ooh, look at that. And then afterwards, some of the young bucks would kind of roll around and play. And the thing I noticed is that anytime I tried to use the Aikido while we were actually, semi-fighting and sparring and whatnot, it just couldn't make it work. And it wouldn't do anything. And so one guy in the Aikido class, every time I tried to grab him, he would just pop my hands away. And I said, dude, what are you doing?
You're not supposed to do that.
Yeah, I just couldn't grab him. So, he just tore me up. I was like, man, you just kicked my rear. And didn't say that, but, And he's like, nah, it was a little girl from China who did that. And I was like, oh, what do you mean by that? And he was like, well, it was Wing Chun. And I said, huh, what is this Wing Chun you speak of? And so, anyway, he started talking to me about this martial art, Wing Chun Kung Fu, which, most of your listeners are probably into martial arts, so they recognize that as a form of Kung Fu that Bruce Lee actually made popular. That was his initial starting art. And so I was intrigued, and I realized, well, I'm doing this Aikido stuff, and it's not working for me, so I need to find this Wing Chun.
Really?
So it just so happened that after graduation from school, I went back to Fayetteville for about a year to stay with my family and kind of poke around and just, find myself, figure out what I was going to do between school and law school, between undergrad and law school. And there happened to be a Wing Chun school in Fayetteville. So I started doing that, and I was getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to train with this guy. And I was doing this with these military guys who would get PT credit, physical training credit, for doing the Wing Chun in the mornings. And so, needless to say, I was getting my butt handed to me by these guys who were, all oorah and, just really, they were doing this because they were going to use it at some point, and they were pretty ferocious about it. And so I just fell in love. I just thought it was the bee's knees, and this is the greatest martial art in the whole world. I mean, after all, Bruce Lee did it, right? So it must be the best.
It's got to be the best.
So I was just enamored of it, and I just wanted to learn it, and I trained hard for a good year. After that, I got into law school, and I moved back up to Chapel Hill. I actually ended up going to law school in Durham, not at Duke, thank God, but at North Carolina Central University. And anyway, but I stayed in Chapel Hill, and my Sifu told me, look, one of my senior students is going to be running a school in Raleigh, kind of an offshoot, a satellite of my school, so I want you to get up there. And so I did. So I started training in Raleigh with this Wing Chun student. He was a senior student, so he was getting ready to sort of, be in charge of things. And once again, took to it, loved it, had a great time, was learning a lot of it, even became an assistant instructor there, was really feeling good about it. And over time, because of school and, life and whatever, I just decided, okay, well, I feel like I've learned what I've needed to learn here in Wing Chun, so I'm going to back off for a little bit. Of course, I made some friends in the Wing Chun school, and one of those friends, a guy named Corey, he kept up with me. And after I left the school, he got back in touch with me about a year or so later and said, hey, man, you want to get together? We'll just do some training on our own and play around. So we did. And we would do a lot of Wing Chun-y sort of stuff, but it turned out this cat, after he had left the Wing Chun school, he had found a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu school. It was a Hoist Gracie affiliate school, and he started training a little bit of Jiu-Jitsu. And so he would do, as we would spar, he would occasionally take me down. And of course, I mean, he had just started. He, was a white belt, but he had learned obviously more jiu-jitsu than I did. I didn't know how to spell jiu-jitsu, much less grapple at all. And he could really take advantage of that. And, if he got me to the ground, I mean, it was just...
You were toast.
I was mostly toast. Yeah, I mean, he didn't have a lot to work with, but he had more than I did. So, I mean, I got rear naked choked more than I'd like to admit. And so I was intrigued. I really felt like, oh, man, my Wing Chun stuff, it's the greatest, But I would get taken down. And this jiu-jitsu stuff was just rocking my world, and I didn't understand it. Now, of course, let's back up about... What was it, about 6 years before that, I was luckily one of those people who convinced his father to get the pay-per-view of the first Ultimate Fighting Championship. And I saw Royce Gracie out there and doing his jiu-jitsu. And, like many rednecks at the same time, I felt like, oh, look at that guy. He's laying on his back. What he's doing, he's just wrestling.
He needs to get up and fight.
Why can't he hit somebody? And I didn't really appreciate it for what it was. I mean, he was winning fights, but I felt like there was like an asterisk. Well, he's winning, but... And so it took me a long time to swallow that pill of what you're doing ain't working. It ain't right. So, of course...
That Kool-Aid tastes good while you're drinking.
Yeah, it does. It's hard to stop drinking that Kool-Aid. Or change Kool-Aid.
Which we've all done, believe me.
Oh, God. Yeah, all of us at some point. There are lots of stories of that. Guys coming into jiu-jitsu schools thinking, oh, I'm going to show them what my Wang Bang Fang does to their jiu-jitsu, and then they get handed. And, yeah. So it happened. So anyway, Corey introduced me to jiu-jitsu, and I was sort of like, you know what, maybe I should give this a try. I never did actually go to that school that he went to. Thought about it, but always had a good excuse. Oh, school is too busy, or getting ready to graduate, got to do the job thing and whatnot. So anyway, as I started practicing law, was running my own practice and started networking more, and I met this guy who's in Durham, and he was sort of a jack of all trades kind of martial artist. And he would have this sort of garage group, and we would all get together with him and do a little bit of cross training, a little bit of striking, a little bit of grappling. He had a Kempo background.
Who is this?
This is John Barr.
John Barr, shout out to John Barr.
That's right. Way to go, John Barr. So he's a Kempo background guy, and but he did a lot of Muay Thai, and so a lot of striking stuff, and then he would want to do a little grappling too, just dabbling. And so we did a little bit of that, and I was still of the opinion, in my mind, I'd been brainwashed myself, willingly said that, oh, my striking is sufficient. All I need to do is just avoid getting taken down, because that's easy, right? So anyway, I would go and train with him a little bit, and he was telling me about this guy named Marty that he knew about. He's like, hey, man, you gotta meet this guy Marty. Sometimes he comes and trains with us, and his jiu-jitsu is pretty tight. I mean, I have a hard time beating him because of this, but it's just kind of fun. So anyway, enter Marty Josie here. We're at a UFC at John Barr's one night, and there's Marty. Oh, there's this Marty guy. He's the guy who does the jiu-jitsu. So, of course, then I show up at your house. First time I show up, you had canceled training. I didn't know it. The second time I showed up in the garage, it was on. Yeah. And I would, we'd play around a little bit, and I would try my little Wing Chun-y chain punch or whatever, and I would end up with my back on the mat. And I realized from then on, I was convinced what I was doing was not working. And
that's funny because I really didn't know. I don't feel like I knew hardly anything at that point either. But so just a little bit more levels. Than you, and that's all it takes to open someone's eyes. That wow, this stuff really works. Yeah. Need to get some more of this. Before you continue on to the kind of where you are now, we got to tell our Naga story because that happened around this time after you started coming to the garage. So Jeff and I were training in the garage, had just a real small group, and we're basically piecing things together from YouTube videos, maybe some books and things like that, and just kind of getting what we can. And I think we just started a curriculum called BJJ America, which is a DVD program through a couple of Machado black belts. So was it David Meyer and John Will?
Yep.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So we had just started kind of dabbling in that, and because we wanted more of a structured program to follow, and all of a sudden John Will, I think it was him, wrote a book about competition, And to this point, I had a different background in all arts, or a lot of arts rather, but it was pretty much all self-defense, except I did compete in Taekwondo for a brief period. But so I read this book. Actually, I read a page, if not two, of this book, and I was like, whoa. Something just struck a chord in me that I was like, wow. And I don't know if it was, I don't remember what it said, something to the effect of, challenge yourself, not think of it as trying to beat someone else or something like that. And I was just like, oh, it really just touched a nerve. And I immediately called Jeff, you got to read this book. Because I've read all but one or two pages. So Jeff gets the book, and he had a pretty similar experience, right? Just after reading a little bit of it.
Oh, no doubt. The light bulb just went off, flip the switch, and all those other metaphors. And
so all of a sudden, we decided to
go to a competition. We got
to do a competition, and it might as well have been the World Championships, because in our mind it was this huge thing that we built it up that this is it, man. We got to do this, and we spent about 4.5 months training. It was the NAGA, North American Grappling Association, Georgia State competition, and outside of Atlanta. So
was that 2009?
2009. I was living in a hotel. My family, our house had gotten flooded, so it was a pretty stressful time. And I remember we drove to Virginia to watch one competition, just so the one we compete at wouldn't be the first one we ever walked into.
And let's pause on that for a second too, because a lot of our listeners, I'm sure, will have done several BJJ competitions. Yes. And you can imagine, so your first entry into a competition, you don't want to walk in there not having ever seen.
Because you're already going to be nervous, but you don't want to be completely overwhelmed.
So we wanted to see what these things were like. So we went to this Naga, Virginia one. Go ahead, sorry.
Which was a good experience. No, so for the next 4.5 months, we really, really got dedicated. And if you're someone out there who routinely does a lot of competitions, this may sound silly to you, but in our mind, man, this was it. So we spent about 4.5 months really working out a lot together, but also on our own doing a lot of conditioning. I think you came up with kind of a framework of doing rounds, sparring rounds, various exercises.
Boss Rutan sort of super round thing where you do these anaerobic burst things for like 30 seconds each, and then you do that for 5 minutes. So it simulates like a fight, like a mixed martial arts fight. You do it for 5-minute rounds, and you're bursting on all these different exercises for 30 seconds each.
Which was awesome, because back then, you hear a lot about that kind of training now, but at the time there wasn't a whole lot out there. So luckily he came across that with the Boz Rutan and kind of formulated this thing for us. We really did a lot of conditioning, and we formulated our own kind of roadmap for our game, so to speak, on what our favorite pathway to success would be, and contingencies if this happened. So to not be going to a school, we did pretty well in our own mind with that. And really got serious with the diet. I ended up losing about 27 pounds. And what did you lose?
About 20.
About 20. Yeah, we were definitely slimmed down and in some of the best shape in many, many years, if not ever. So finally the time came. And by the way, I was wrestling with a kidney stone while preparing for this, which really made it fun and interesting. And I remember the day we were driving down to Atlanta. We were in North Carolina. And I remember having to pretty much starve myself all day to make sure I made this weight. And it just was really rough. And then we weighed in the night before, and I barely made weight, which come to find out didn't matter because they didn't have enough people in my weight class, and I had to go in the heavyweight anyway.
Which is something, once you start doing more competitions, you realize it happens, especially if you're competing in, an older bracket or whatever. There may be 2 people that show up. There may be 1, there may be 7. You don't know. And so
they got to work with what they got, and you may be put in a bracket with whomever. So we were there the next day, and it's all exciting, and here we go, we're ready to do this. And so I look over across the way, and there's Jeff getting ready for his first match, and I'm over in my little group, and so I can see him from across the mat. And all of a sudden his match starts, his first match, and I'm watching. Like 30 seconds later, it's over. And Jeff had just caught this guy in a guillotine and made quick work of him. And I was like, holy crap, he did it. And I was like, man, it gave me butterflies. I was like, I got to do this too now, man. I got to do this.
Well, and I cheated sort of too. I mean, not in cheat. I don't mean that. But it turns out I had a similar situation with the whole weight and the bracket deal, because nobody showed for the skill level, but same weight above me, except for one guy. So they were going to move me and this other guy he and I were at the same skill level, same weight, and they were going to move both of us up so we could just compete in the bracket with him, but I kind of lawyered it and said, well, I got an idea. Why don't you let me and this guy, who are in the same weight class, same skill class, why don't you let us battle it out for that division?
Nice.
And then we can then move up to the next skill level,
right.
and then both of us can go with him. So we kind of got to compete in 2 skill levels.
That's really cool.
And had I not done that, it wouldn't have worked out as well for me. But yeah, so
that was kind of behind the scenes detail of the whole story. That's good.
That's good stuff. Yeah, and so I only had one match in my entire bracket, and that was the championship match. So
instant champ. Bam,
30 seconds.
30 seconds to victory. So yeah, I saw that and I was like, dang, that's awesome. Now I've definitely got to do it too. I said, I just hope they don't pair me with this big
meathead
muscle man with the shirt off over here. Because, if you go to a competition and you're going to go with your shirt off, there's just something intimidating about it, at least to me. So all of a sudden, guess what? That's your first match, meathead with the shirt off. And I'm like, wonderful. But luckily, I was able to take him down and do pretty well and won on points. So I was really
glossing
happy.
over this. Let me take over this right now because Mr. Humble over here is going to say, luckily I was able to win. My boy.
Oh, boy.
He just blasted through this guy. I mean, struggled, fought, just going all out with this guy. And remember, too, Marty didn't really emphasize this before, but there wasn't anybody in his weight class. So he was going up against guys who were, a good 10, 20 pounds heavier. I mean, they looked like 185, 195 guys. I mean, they were up there. And you had gotten down to
179.
179. I mean, these guys were big and they were brutes. And I mean, you were
thanks.
more than holding your own against them.
Appreciate it.
And you went, was a 5-minute time limit?
4, I don't know, 4 or 5.
I can't remember.
It seemed like about 20, but it was either 4 or 5.
Yeah.
So I managed to win that one, and then it was time for Jeff's second one because, like you said, he kind of
got a different bracket.
Yeah, negotiated to do both. So then he went in the next skill level up, and ended up getting second.
Yeah. The guy who was in his own, he was the only person who showed up for that skill level. He and I went the distance. He managed to take me down as we were sort of struggling for takedowns, and managed to get on top. I fought, but he managed to mount me, and he did, of all things, I mean, looking back on it, he's a wrestler, and he did that sort of can opener sort of deal. And at that point, I mean, I was just like, man, that's just no fun. And I didn't want to be that. I mean, a little older, maybe if I'd been younger, I would have cared more. But I was like, I don't want to just sit here and get my neck cranked. So I started to tap. And just as I tapped, the ref said, time. So the guy looked up and he was like, he was just crestfallen. He was like, no, I tapped this guy. And I said, look, you can have it. I mean, you did. I mean, I tapped, so I don't mind you saying that. And the ref was like, no, it was time. So you didn't. So whatever. But that guy ended up winning first in that division. And then, of course, I ended up going against the same guy who I guillotined on the first match in that championship round. We cannot forget that.
Right.
And that guy, when I went up against him again, I'd forgotten this detail until I'd read my summary that I'd written about it that you shared with me a while back. But yeah, he was so keyed up. He literally growled at me as he was coming at me.
He wanted to get a little payback.
Oh, yeah. And his coach was there. I mean, he's got one of these BJJ coaches with his mouthpiece behind his ear yelling instructions at him, whatever. And just, telling him what to do. I don't remember what he was saying, but he was yelling at him. And anyway, he ended up, he got on top. He took me down. It was sort of a trip. And I think I had him in half guard. And I put on an arm triangle from the bottom and tapped him again. And it wasn't much longer than the first one. But,
I remember.
So anyway, he was much disappointed. But there was a silver medal for me. So I got me a samurai sword for winning the first one. Got me a silver medal for that one. And then it was time to go coach you up.
Yeah, so, and I enjoyed having you coach me up, by the way. So the next one was this guy who was a little shorter than me, and we started, the match started, and we start kind of clinching, and he ends up headbutting me, like, several times. Not the kind of headbutt like when someone's on top of you and raining it down, but he's kind of coming from under in a clinch, coming up, bam, bam, and I was like, what the? And it really took me back, because I wasn't expecting it. And then the referee separated us and warned him, and all of a sudden my fur was up, man. I was kind of like, this feels more like a fight. And I was like, man, you son of a gun. And I was like, really, you want that? So it definitely got me going. I ended up getting him down and getting in the scarf position, which is one of the few positions I did pretty decently at the time. So I got him in that, and anytime he would try to frame, and I don't normally try to be overly mean to people, but like I said, he'd kind of really tick me off. So anytime he would try to frame from that scarf, I would just bend his arm over, push it against his nose, and just lay my weight on it, and just kind of plow into him, and ended up bloodening his nose quite a bit. And they had to stop us and let us clean up and everything. But anyway, so I ended up winning that one.
It was pretty bloody for
it was kind of interesting for a grappling
jiu-jitsu tournament. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot more exciting with some blood, I guess. But anyway,
there you go.
Anyway, the third one, oh, by the way, I won this, and I was like, thank God, because I thought that was the battle for first and second. I thought I was done. And all of a sudden, I'm laying there exhausted, and they said, yeah, okay, so now you got to go one more time. I'm like, what? I was like, there's no way. I looked at Jeff and said, there's no way I can do this again. And he goes, yeah, you can. And Jeff was nice enough to, my right bicep was just toast. Jeff was nice enough to do a little sports massage on it and kind of get it back. And I was like, at least, that was some moral support. I was like, man. So it wasn't that much time in between either. So it was time to go against this big hulking, this guy was just a brute. And luckily he didn't have a lot of technique yet because he was much stronger than me and I was tired. So I was able to get a takedown. He tried to pull a headlock on me and take me down. I stepped behind him, was able to get him down, and luckily controlled positions and fought off a few other takedown attempts. And then squeezed it out. And remember the guy you had coaching him? This big Hulk guy.
Oh my God! The dude with the big shield tattoo.
That was a cool tattoo.
Yeah,
but he was a huge dude. Anyway, so I ended up winning this, and I was just elated. And Jeff and I, like I said, it might as well have been the World Championships because all day long we're walking around with our Naga shirts and our swords calling each other champ. What's up, champ?
I know.
It was hilarious. We were having the most fun with it. And then to make it, to top it all off, after all the training and the dedication and sacrifice, they had a UFC that was going on that day.
It was in Germany.
Yeah, and because it was in Germany, it was airing at like 3 p.m. here. So it wasn't, one of these late night ones. So we got to go down to Hooters and celebrate our victory and watch the UFC and carried our swords everywhere, and it was just a blast.
And let's not leave out our families too. At the time, I just had one child, and she was an infant. She was tiny, but you brought your wife and kids, and my mother-in-law had met us up there as well. And shout out to them because they all went with us to Hooters.
That's right.
To watch the UFC.
They indulged us,
and of course, we had our tournament was done, so we got to eat whatever we wanted.
We tore up some stuff.
Town.
Yep.
Wing City.
For sure.
Yeah, that was an awesome experience.
It really.
And looking back on it, our listeners, I'm sure a lot of them are into jiu-jitsu. Obviously, if they're listening to this thing, and they've probably done 25 tournaments,
and it's probably pretty silly.
But not a big deal to them. But man, this was our first tournament, and we were white belts, and for us to be training ourselves
in our garage,
out of a garage.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, here's something we should go back to. When we checked in, our listeners will be familiar with this. When you check in, there are a few tables, and there's these guys that work for Naga, and they're checking in. And all these guys are into jiu-jitsu, too. They train, and they're serious about it. And so they're checking in. So what's your school? Oh, we just train out of this guy's garage. And there was a little chuckle. There was like,
okay.
All right, well, good for you. Yeah, it's great.
And that made it even more of a moral victory because we went against people that were out of school, structured program and a curriculum out of school, and we not only held our own, but did pretty well. So that felt great.
For real. As a matter of fact, I remember emailing, was it Meyer? David Meyer doing the BJJ America program? Because, we were doing his program.
Yeah, right.
He wasn't the only source of our stuff, but I remember emailing him saying, hey, man, look, we represented.
Right on. And then right soon after that, or not that long after that, is when the Gracie University was launched, and we were like, oh, boy, we got to go to that. That's it, But let me back up. I wanted to say that was my only competition experience. Aside from last April in the in-house tournament at the Bushin Academy in Williamsburg, Virginia. Shout out to the Nguyen brothers there and all the gang there. That competition was where Scott Allen made quick. I hope I have that name right. Scott Allen made a quick work of me. So shout out to him as well. Props. And I haven't really wanted to compete anymore, except, just recently I started kind of getting the bug a little bit. I've started kind of thinking, maybe it'd be fun to do that again.
Yeah, maybe. I won't close the door on it.
Right.
I'm going to be 40 in November, so part of me wants to just kind of wait until I get to that, and then I can get into the whatever the name of it is, the executives division
well,
or
mine's
whatever.
the old man bracket now, so maybe
That's
why
right.
I'm excited again to do it.
There you go.
And I've never done competed in gi. That was the no gi that we both did way back then.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, awesome, great. Well, one of the peak experience of my life for sure, and we'll always have that for sure.
Oh God, yeah, it was wonderful. It was so fun.
All right, so Jeff, okay, so let's continue on to where you were. We were in my garage working out, and then where to go for there in your training.
Well, as we mentioned, we were doing sort of 75% BJJ America curriculum, and then maybe 25% gathering stuff from YouTube or this book or that book. I remember I had like that Hoist Gracie bottom game, I think, book, and so we were stealing techniques from there.
Right,
and you had some books, I had some BJ Penn and this and that, and so we were just putting it all together from wherever we could. But then after that tournament, I mean, literally, I think weeks after the tournament, you found the Gracie University program, and it had taken you a long time to convince me to get on board with the BJJ America thing, because I just wanted to dabble. Let's just do Jeet Kune Do style stuff of gather from here, and I was like and then finally did the BJJ America, but then Gracie University, and you showed it to me, and oh my God, I remember my jaw hitting the floor watching this, because the level of instruction was unparalleled. I mean, looking at it was, of course, our listeners may or may not be experienced with it, but their entry-level program is the Combatives program, and when you watch the Combatives videos, I mean, you get 30 or 45 minutes discussion and details from Henry and Hiron on these techniques. And to this day, fast forward a little bit, whenever we show these Combatives techniques to people who have been training jiu-jitsu elsewhere, they invariably say, I have never seen that detail.
Yeah.
I have never seen that level of detail. Oh, I've been doing it this way for so long, but now I'm going to start doing it that way because that makes so much more sense. Just amazing stuff. So, of course, we got into the Gracie University curriculum and followed that very religiously. Worked hard on it, and I never will forget. I was ready to ready to test for my blue belt, and you have to do that back in the day when we were doing the online program. You have to film a video and then submit it. And I wanted to film it all at one time. I didn't want to do it in
any kind of segments.
Yeah, and so I remember I was desperate to get it done. We had planned to do it on this particular night, and I was ready to do it. And as we mentioned before, we're in North Carolina, and when it snows in North Carolina, everything shuts down.
Really?
I mean, none of us know how to drive in it. It's just apocalypse. So anyway, it snowed that night, and I was like, I don't care. I am going to go to Marty's. We're going to video this thing, and we're going to get it done. And so we were able to get it done, and despite the snow, and got that test in. And I remember you hosted a UFC event about 2 weeks later, and we shared the news with our old garage folks, John Barr, and all those other guys that trained with us. Hey, look, Jeff's a blue belt.
Matter of fact, I put it on brought it up the Gracie University on my computer, and then put it on the TV. It just said, "Hey, what's this?" And I had your name.
Yeah, because they show for those of you not familiar with the Gracie University online curriculum, whenever you pull up your profile, it will show your belt up at the top right corner, and so there's blue belt.
Yep.
And I mean, none of us had any ranking in jiu-jitsu at that time. None of us had any officially sanctioned ranking. So it was. Yeah.
It was. And also during this time, we pretty much are both only doing jiu-jitsu now, but once we started Gracie University, we also were still doing other things like we still did some. I have a background in Kempo, so I started kind of teaching you some Kempo and taking you through this curriculum, and we went all the way through to black belt with Kempo.
That's right.
As well as we both did the Paul Vunek program of contemporary Jeet Kune Do progressive fighting system.
That's right.
We did an apprentice instructorship for that, so that was pretty cool too.
That's true. Yeah. We shouldn't gloss over that. I mean, all martial arts experience is helpful.
Absolutely. And
yeah, you did. You helped me get a black belt in Kempo, which was an awesome experience, and learned a lot from that. And yeah, the Paul Vunek stuff was great. We got our apprentice instructor certificates in progressive fighting systems, which was cool.
That's
a little
good.
Striking,
Absolutely,
and whatnot.
And I love all arts, some more than others, but I like dabbling in a lot of them. But as time would dictate with families and everything, you only have so much time to train, so you kind of eventually have to narrow down and pick what we want to devote a lot of time to get better and get progress in. So that's pretty much why we're both doing jiu-jitsu, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu now only.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so What's been the most interesting or exciting thing for you about practicing Gracie Jiu-Jitsu?
Um, a few different things. I mean, I'm a guy and I've got a bit of testosterone, not as much as some, but I've got some. And what's really fun for me is to be able to win against other guys. I mean, I'm not afraid to admit it. I enjoy doing that, especially I'm a smaller guy. I'm 5'8" at my best with an inch on my soles, right?
5'7".
So, exactly. So, and I don't weigh a lot, and I'm not huge or anything. So, yeah, I'm a small guy, and to be able to win in a grappling situation with somebody, or in a striking situation, I can take them down and have my way with them. And it's nice. I like it.
Sure.
And to take that to the different level. Hopefully, I'm not anticipating any extra questions, but sort of a generalization and then an example of this. As a generalization, I feel so much more confident than I otherwise would have through martial arts. I got the same sort of confidence from Wing Chun because I believed that I could hold my own against anyone. Whether or not that was true at the time, I don't know. But now, having done a fair amount of jiu-jitsu, I mean, as of now, I've been doing jiu-jitsu, like 8 years or something. So I mean, it's getting up there, on and off, of course. Now more on than off. But yeah, I mean, I've gotten that confidence from being able to win on the mat a lot, going against people, bigger, stronger, faster than me, and getting that general confidence against anyone. I don't have to be afraid of anybody. I don't have to. I mean, I can hold my own, literally, against anybody.
Do you find yourself, I've heard Henner say when he sees a giant, a huge person, wherever you're out somewhere, instead of thinking, wow, that guy's like huge, and kind of any fear, you start thinking, interesting.
Yeah, I start fighting him in my head.
And not because you want to go be violent to the guy, but because, I think I have some tools that might deal with it.
I'm not worried about it. And exactly, I mean, that's exactly what I do constantly. As a matter of fact, I'll be, dealing with a defense attorney or an adjuster or a DA or whatever other people in my law practice, and I'll think, dude, you would not stand a chance. You would not stand a chance. I would rock your world. But anyway, I mean, not that I'm violent or anything, but, it's
actually
just
very easygoing and peaceful.
For reals. So anyway, here's a particular example of that. I mean, nothing. Don't get too excited, guys. No fight actually happens in this, but it's one of those situations where jiu-jitsu kind of gave me the confidence to speak up. So I was flying to meet my wife's family. I think it was for the first time, as a matter of fact, my future wife's family. And my connecting flight got missed somehow. I don't remember exactly how, but it wasn't my fault. But the airline screwed up. And so anyway, all of us who missed this flight were standing in line, and we were waiting to talk to the airline person about getting on a different flight. And there happened to be a kid who was traveling by himself. He was like 13, 14 or something. I'm not very good at guessing that, but roughly that. And he was standing in front of me in line. And he was like, maybe one or two people back from the front of the line. And all of a sudden, this hulking dude, 6'3", 250 plus, just comes up, boom, right in front of this kid. And this was right when this kid was getting ready to go.
Wow.
So those people in front of him had gone. He just walks right in front of this kid. And the airline lady, she sees it. She sees it happening, but she still deals with him. And she starts talking with him like, okay,
wow.
sir, we're going to get you. And I said, hold up. So I started talking to this guy, big hulking man. And I was like, look, man, you just jumped in front of this kid, not to mention everybody else in the back of this line. I mean, who do you think you are? And he's like, well, And I was like, hey, airline lady.
You should have done it in a Spicoli voice. Hey, bud.
Hey,
what's your problem?
So, anyway, airline lady, she still deals with him. She's like, oh, it's okay. No, it's not. But anyway, she deals with him. And, the kid gets skipped. And it was, it just wasn't right. But, it's not like I'm going to take the guy down in the airport or whatever. And it's not worth that. I mean, it's just, who was first in line. But still, one of those things where, hey, I'm not afraid of the guy. I can say what I want to say because it's not right. But anyway, a couple came up to me afterwards, and they're like, you know what, that was really brave. We're really, I know it didn't do anything, but kudos to you for standing up to that guy.
Nice.
So anyway, just one of those examples of
awesome
what it does.
So it certainly translates into all areas of your life and on and off the mat. Okay, so how do you manage your time to do jiu-jitsu, and what, if anything, do you or have you had to give up to do jiu-jitsu?
I don't think I've really had to give up anything. I feel pretty good with my time management. I mean, I run my own law practice, so it takes a lot of my time. But, I work when it's time to work. and then I'm a family guy when it's time to do family. Thankfully, the classes that we do now take place just after the time when we get both of the kids to bed. So I routinely put one of my children to bed by myself every night, and then I come to train. So I haven't really had to give up anything. I mean, if I've had to give up anything, it's stuff that I shouldn't be doing anyway, like drinking beer and eating bonbons. So that's probably positive.
Nice. It is probably positive. So tell us about your time off the mat. Do you have a favorite activity besides jiu-jitsu?
I like talking about jiu-jitsu a lot. That's probably my favorite activity, although I love watching UFC. As a matter of fact, UFC Fight Pass, get it. Oh, my God.
You recently signed up for that,
Recently signed up for UFC Fight Pass, and you can watch all these old fights. Although,
nice.
Dana, you got to get your boy working on that a little bit more, because there are some fights where it says, here, you can watch this fight, and you click on it, and you can't watch that fight. It ain't up yet.
Not
but,
cool.
Yeah, but most of them are, by far the majority. So, oh, my God, it's awesome. But other than that, reading.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent.
It's fun. Oh, yeah, I like my family, too. They're great.
Got to get that in there. In fact, they're everything. So being an attorney, I know every state and country is different, but regarding its laws, but are there any general rules of thought you can share regarding the legal side or aspect of self-defense and martial arts?
Great caveat you put in there. Every state, every country is going to have its different sort of thing about self-defense and that sort of thing. So good you mentioned that. First, let me say one of my favorite little stories that I hear all the time about martial arts. You talk to people in general. We're wearing our Gracie gear out all the time, so people stop and talk to us. And invariably, I'll hear, my Uncle Billy, he's got a black belt in Koshikin Shingdong Par, and he had to go register himself as a lethal weapon at the sheriff's office. I love hearing that. Nothing like that exists that I've ever heard of in North Carolina. I don't know about the rest of the world. But, yeah, that's the most ridiculous thing.
You don't have to get like your back of your hand branded lethal weapon or something?
No, nothing like that.
Okay.
Nothing, no barcodes
All right.
or anything. The number one interaction between martial arts, self-defense, training, and the law is the legal defense of self-defense, meaning if you injure someone in a fight, in an altercation, and you are charged with assault or whatever it might be, murder, heaven forbid, or whatever, that you can raise the defense of self-defense, meaning you had to do it because, it was you or him. Right. He was attacking you. And generally, it's fairly cut and dried. If the guy is the aggressor and he's attacking you, then you can defend yourself. The number one thing to remember in self-defense, particularly in North Carolina, is you have to use reasonable force. Okay, now what does reasonable force mean?
Should that be air quotes?
I am using air quotes as I say reasonable force. You can hear that in the voice, right?
Right.
Now, what does reasonable force mean? It means sort of the similar level of force that the guy is giving to you. So if he comes at you with his fists and his feet, well, then that's what you need to do. Okay. Come back at him with fists and feet.
But if he's just talking trash...
Well, that doesn't count. That's not.
You can't just.
No.
Let me ask you this. Let's say you're saying you're in a bar or wherever, restaurant, and someone gets mad at you for whatever reason. They get up in your space, and you try to step back, and they get in your space. They're violating your personal space, foaming at the mouth, being very intimidating, and saying, "I'm going to whoop your butt." And you think, okay, this is going to happen. It's on imminent threat or whatever.
Ooh,
you think,
I
really believe that this is I'm about to be harmed.
Yeah.
But they haven't touched you yet.
Yeah.
Is it okay to launch an attack?
That's a question of fact that it would have to be tried.
Okay.
It's hard to say. It depends on the circumstances. Let's say it's a little person who's doing that to you, who doesn't present, a likely reasonable threat to you.
Okay.
He's just talking. Well, then you deck him. Well, that's probably not reasonable force or a reasonable apprehension of imminent physical contact.
Right.
But let's say this guy out heights you by a foot and outweighs you by 100 pounds, and he's coming towards you and he's saying these words. Then there you go. That's much more likely to be deemed as a reasonable response, because in that situation, do you want to wait to get hit first?
Right.
I mean, maybe not. Now, I have seen some not so great case law on that though too. So in other words, if you can avoid hitting first, great. But that's what's so beautiful about using jiu-jitsu as self-defense, because you
hitting, you're
clinch.
just- yeah.
You clinch with the guy.
Right.
You're not doing anything. Hey, I'm hugging him so he doesn't hit me.
There's ways to control him without having to just pound him. Would it be advisable to put your hands up in a non-threatening manner and say, "Hey, man, I don't want to fight," or something to that effect, so those around you will see that you're trying not to be aggressive?
Definitely. Because and remember, you're always preparing your case for defense whenever this is happening. So you put your hands up and you make it clear, I am not looking for a fight. I do not want to do this. And you can even verbalize that to the guy and say, look, if you come any closer, I'm going to feel threatened. And if you say that out loud, and then he still comes closer, well, when the witness says that on the stand, well, he came closer, even though the guy said don't come closer because he's going to feel threatened.
Well, then
obviously
parameters and boundaries, and he decided to keep violating.
There it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Ultimately, you ever heard the expression, better to be, what is it? Better be
judged by 12 than carried by 6. Yeah, I subscribe to that for sure. No doubt. No doubt.
All right. Well, great. Thanks for sharing that legal aspects to us. Anything else as far as the legal aspects that come to mind that you want to throw in there?
Nah, that stuff's pretty boring.
Okay. So here's something that's not boring. If you could train with anyone, living or deceased, who would that be?
Oh God, there's so many people. Jeez, am I limited to one?
You're limited to two.
Two.
Yeah,
Okay.
Let's do first and second.
Okay, then how about I do a living person and a deceased person?
How about it?
There we go. So deceased, Hollis Gracie. I mean, I hear all these almost like semi-mythological things about this guy and about how his jiu-jitsu was just, out of this world. And so I'd love to have that experience with him. I'm probably not good enough to appreciate what he can do, but I'd certainly like the opportunity. I think that would be amazing. In terms of living folks, gosh, that's hard. I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to give you two because I think they're tied. I've been lucky enough to be at seminars and the Destin Jiu-Jitsu vacation immersion camp thing, and I've been able to train with Hiron Gracie, and wow, that's a great experience. But
absolutely.
I have to say, I'd also like to train with Hickson. So there we go.
No doubt. I rank my experience with Hickson years ago as definitely another peak experience, and I wish. I don't want to talk about this every episode, but it comes up. His name comes up, and I just want to say it was definitely awesome. I'd love to be able to do that again. What was cool is he was. It was right around the time, I think maybe the year after he had done the second Vale Tudo in Japan. So everything was really fresh. That's right. He was telling stories about it and everything, and he just had this air of being, a real badass, but not acting like it. He was very easygoing, very approachable, very down to earth. But you could just tell the energy was that if he needed to break something out, he could.
Yeah. I have to say that's what I aspire to. That's what I want. That's what I want ultimately out of my jiu-jitsu practice, for just to emanate.
To emanate it, and yet what's coming out of your voice is, "Yes, my friend, how are you?" You're very gentle, very cool. Yeah.
But that's the thing is, you don't
exactly.
have. If you really are that good, you don't have to act like it.
That's so true. That's not coming from the ego. That's just coming from real substance. Okay, so do you follow the Gracie diet or any other specific nutritional program?
Oh God, I'm embarrassed.
This month?
You had to, yeah, exactly. You know me well enough to know that I've flipped and flopped on a lot of it. Well, so let's talk about the Gracie diet.
I'm just saying it because I do the same things.
I have done the Gracie diet, and I will say when I was on it and I was following it very well for a couple of months there, I felt good. I felt good, and it was doing great. The problem that I personally had with it was the inconvenience. It is just really, really hard to follow it, especially if you're out and about, and more importantly, whenever your family's not involved in it, and you're not doing the grocery shopping, and it's hard. And so you're that guy who's like, "Oh, I can't eat what you just made for me, wife, because it's not on the Gracie diet." You don't like that look coming across the table.
Not great for relationships.
No. Right. So it's too challenging. So I have to say, what I do now is I'm more of a moderation in all things sort of guy, and I just try to keep it easy. And there's a guy, Michael Pollan. I'm sure you're familiar with. You've read some books. I think we've borrowed some back and forth, and he has a few little rules about eating. And if it's made in a plant, don't eat it. If it comes from a plant, eat it.
Right.
So that sort of common sense sort of things. I try to follow that.
You keep it as clean as possible.
As clean as possible, organic.
Like that.
And there's a guy can't think of his name. Sadly, I'm not gonna be able to give him a good plug. But he came up years ago with this Spartan diet regime, and this was before paleo, by the way, guys. And this guy's whole theory was we evolved eating certain stuff, and so his thing, the Spartan diet, because he had admired these, the Spartans, and so he said, hey, if it was available to ancient man, then eat it. And if it wasn't, then don't.
Right.
So if you're going to do grains, whole grains. If you're going to do dairy, drink the full fat, enjoy it.
Right.
Do a lot of fruit, because a lot of early man's diet must have been just tons and tons of fruit, vegetables to a certain degree, nuts, that sort of thing, meat, fine. So to a certain extent, I mean, that's kind of
and I remember you turning me on to that, and fast forward now that the paleo thing is really big. It's very, very similar to that, but this guy was way ahead of that. Kind of, it's pretty cool. And he also had a workout regimen around it as well.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, and I still sort of try to follow that as much as I can, to the extent I have time to do it. One more thing on the diet too is I haven't read this whole article, but I saw a headline last night, and I'll have to share it with you later. And it said, if you really want to follow the paleo diet, you should be eating more bugs. Because apparently bugs were a big part of the diet. So
or do a lot of intermittent fasting, because you couldn't just grab what you wanted. Even if you're choosing this or that, it wasn't so readily available that you can have it whenever you want it.
Exactly.
So, true. Okay, so this kind of goes back to a previous question, but you can just kind of expound on it a little bit if you want. Is what's the most important aspect of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu to you, and how has Gracie Jiu-Jitsu affected your life? I know you talked about the confidence.
Yeah.
But anything else you want to add as far as how it's really had a benefit to you?
Well, there's certainly the health benefit as well. I can't go around eating red velvet cake for every meal, or else I carry that on the mat, and then it's no fun to be the portly guy on the mat rolling around smothered by your own obesity. That's not fun, and you just can't do it. I mean, on top of that, because I'm training, and granted I don't train every day, but 2, sometimes 3 times a week for a couple of hours at a time, it kind of helps to keep me in shape too. So there's the health aspect of it. There's also the mental aspect of it, other than the confidence building thing, which I think is a big key for me, if not everyone. Just the being able to let go of whatever outside the mat or outside the gym problems there are, and to just be confronted with this. My problem right now is this guy who's trying to choke me. This is my problem, and I just get to live in that world.
To stay in the moment.
Yeah, and it's so black and white at that point. It's just so simple, and just it's fun. It's like a game. But it's hard to describe.
Yeah, I agree. You can tap into your problem-solving skills, but things like that, and help you focus on one part at a time. But also, and staying in the moment. But also, just staying calm through the chaos.
Yeah.
So all you have to do right now is deal with this, and then the other stuff will be later. But instead of being, so consumed with all these things at one time, it teaches us to just kind of remain calm, stay safe, protected, deal with this, and then go on to the next thing.
Love it.
Right?
Love
Great.
it.
Awesome. All right. Do you have a favorite quote or motto that inspires you, Jeff, and or one that you live by?
Oh, wow. God, there are tons and tons of little statements and sayings that I think about all the time. What comes to mind immediately, and I'm not going to try to butcher it because it's very long, but that Teddy Roosevelt quote, I think I first heard it, interestingly enough, in a Renzo Gracie documentary, and it was up in his gym, and it talks about the guy who fights and loses, and how he still, even if he fights and he loses, he's still better, and you should still respect him because he went out there and
he's
he
still
tried
in the arena
and he fought.
Yeah.
And you can't judge him for losing because you're sitting down.
That's right.
You're just watching.
That's great.
And I really think about that anytime you're struggling and going through it, well, give yourself kudos for just struggling and going through it.
So true.
Yeah.
So true. That's a great point. Especially also when it comes to competition and stuff. You see all these armchair quarterbacks who say, he should have done this, or what I would do, or he needs to do this, whatever great advice they have. But they're not the ones out there putting it on the line and doing the best they can, and win or lose. You got to respect when people do that. So whether you're talking about a grappling match or UFC or whatever. All right. So, if you had one thing to tell someone who is considering, I'm gonna ask this two ways, and you pick whichever one you want to answer.
All right.
If you had one thing to tell someone who is considering starting Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, what would that be? Or, if you could go back and talk to white belt Jeff, just starting out, new white belt Jeff, what would you tell him? So either
Oh
one of
my
those you want to do,
God.
please do.
Wow. Okay, so I'm gonna do the first one. I may jump up and do the second one too if we don't run out of
Okay.
time, but
All right.
because I love to talk. Have you guys guessed that yet? um, so the thing I would say is that you have to do it. If somebody is thinking about it, you have to do it. It is my favorite thing to do. I mean, it just is. I enjoy it. It impacts me on every level of my being. I love it. It is just. That's right. That's right. I love it. It's just like I said. It helps me build confidence. It keeps me in shape. It is intellectually stimulating.
Indeed.
But at the same time, it keeps me humble. Let me do
And
the
it's
white
fun.
belt thing.
Okay.
Let me do the
White
white belt
belt, go
thing too. I had the good fortune of being allowed to train with the Ole Miss Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Club.
Shout out.
That's right. Whenever I was down in Oxford, Mississippi, that's where my wife and her family are from. And those guys were very welcoming. You know, I said, hey, should I pay a mat fee? Or that? No. You're a jiu-jitsu brother. You come, you train.
Nice.
And I was there for 3 weeks, and I got to train several times. I mean, they were wonderful. They were great. Mike Kane, way to go. Courtney, awesome, good stuff. But anyway, we were talking, you know, just getting to know each other, talking about jiu-jitsu and whatnot. And we were talking about how, isn't it interesting how jiu-jitsu guys, and this is what I'm telling white belt Jeff, okay? Isn't it interesting how jiu-jitsu guys almost invariably, there are exceptions, but almost invariably are the most humble, calm, and inviting and wonderful people whenever you meet them traveling around the world. And we were like, why is that? Why is it? I mean, you're training to be able to defeat people. Why isn't your ego so swollen by your ability to do this? I mean, you're a Jedi. You can go
And
and
that's
just
a great
rule
question
people.
because that's not true in a lot of arts.
It's
a lot
not.
of arts I've experienced, there's a lot more ego and a lot more, the mentality is different.
And I'll tell you why the difference is. And this is what this guy, Mike, this was his answer, and it was a great answer. And he said, it's because if you've trained for any amount of time in jiu-jitsu, you have gotten your butt kicked. You have gotten your butt kicked. And so it teaches you humility. So at the same time you learn these things and you learn how to defeat other people, you too have been defeated.
Right.
So you know what it feels like, and you realize, look, I may know this, that, and the other, but there's always somebody else who knows a little bit more.
It's true.
And so it keeps you humble at the same time. So white belt Jeff, you remember that. Just because you've done your years and years of training this and whatnot, there's always somebody
That's right.
who's better. So
Who's
keep
better,
it humble.
who knows more, and who you can learn from.
And you can learn from.
Right on.
Exactly.
Excellent. Great. So is there anything else you'd like to share with us as we wrap up?
You know, the one thing is continuing on that topic we were just talking about, is you said in a lot of other arts there's a lot of ego and a lot of this, I'm black belt in this and I'm the toughest guy in the world, blah, blah, blah. And I think a lot of that has to do with the actual lack of true competition in those arenas. You know, you get this idea of, you know, let's say you're studying this one art and you're training it, but you're training it in a vacuum against these other people who are doing this art, and you're not actually sparring. I mean, you may say you're sparring, but you're not really fighting, and you're not really fighting against these people who have different types of experience from you. And so there's you coach yourself up to believe, oh, I'm getting good at this.
That's
I learned
good,
this.
yeah.
But on the mat in jiu-jitsu, you fight and you lose and you win.
Right, and that's one. And even though we keep it playful and we don't try to kill each other, you can go all out without necessarily injuring each other. Where in other arts, if you're doing karate, and nothing against karate, it's got a lot of benefits. But one thing it lacked, as far as in this particular area, is if you go all out, you're going to just kill each other.
Somebody
you
gets
smash
hurt.
somebody in the face, it's like breaking a board. You're going to break their face, break the rib, whatever. So you have to pull back some, or wear a lot of padding, or pull back and do points or whatever. And there are exceptions. There's some people that go all out bare knuckle, or even though they wear padding, they're trying to take each other's heads off. But it's kind of an exception because not that many people are drawn to that level of violent, aggressive training. And if, I'm not saying there's not a place for that, but for the most part, you go into a lot of martial arts schools and they're punching in the air or punching a bag or a pad. And again, nothing wrong with that, but it's not the same as being able to go kind of all out like you can with jiu-jitsu without really injuring yourself or someone else.
Wood doesn't hit back.
That's a good point. Good point.
But that's not the disparage of the martial arts.
Right,
Please don't
absolutely.
get me wrong. I know
They
you're
all
not
have
doing
their
that, but I
place.
want to.
They all have their place and they all have their benefit for sure.
Yeah, you can learn something from everything for sure.
And really want to emphasize that point that we're certainly not tearing down any other kind of art at all.
God,
Respect all arts and everybody that practices those. Well, I want to really thank you very much, Jeff, for letting us get to know you better and sharing, your insight and thoughts on Gracie Jiu-Jitsu as well as other things. So appreciate it very much. And I definitely want to have you back co-hosting some episodes because I think you bring a lot to it. So thanks very much, and keep it real, brother.
I'm stoked. Thanks, man. Appreciate you letting me ramble. It's going to be fun.
Okay, time for our Make an Impact, Make a Difference segment. Today's quote is, "Peace. It does not mean to be in a place where there is no noise, trouble, or hard work. It means to be in the midst of all those things and still be calm in your heart." And the author's unknown. So I'd like for us to think about the eye of a storm. Now, the eye of the storm is the center of a twister, hurricane, or tornado that is calm and almost isolated from the frenzy and activity going on around it. Everything around it is violent and turbulent, but the center remains calm and peaceful. So how cool would it be if we could live our life like we're being in the eye of a storm? And obviously we don't have to be perfect at this, but what it takes to cultivate this are two things: the intention and practice. One way to cultivate this, one way to practice this is, let's say you're going to a family gathering and you know that it's going to be chaotic and you're kind of dreading it. You can use this time and tell yourself that you're going to use this experience as an opportunity to remain calm. You can commit to being the one person in the room that's going to be an example of peace. You can practice breathing. You can practice listening. You can let the other person be right and enjoy the glory. The point is, you can do it if you set your mind to it. By starting off with scenarios like this, or things like cocktail parties, birthday parties for children, or things like that, you can build a track record and enjoy some initial success. You'll notice that being in the eye of the storm will make you be more present moment oriented, and you'll enjoy yourself more than you have before. Once you've mastered these situations or areas, you can practice in more difficult areas, such as dealing with conflict, hardship, or grief, things like that. If you start slowly, have some success, and build on that and keep practicing, pretty soon you'll be able to live your life in the eye of the storm. And that's going to do it for today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. And as always, if you enjoyed it, please head over to our website at www.graciejujitsurocks.com and post a comment. Also head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Again, thanks for listening. This is Marty Josie, and I'll see you on the mat.